Jazz stands for freedom. It's supposed to be the voice of freedom. Get out there and improvise and take chances. Dave Brubeck. Jazz across borders, the cultural revolution, reaction, and reform of jazz's globalization. Jazz embraces freedom and individualism. Spontaneous and improvisational, it was a revolution that broke from centuries of European musical evolution. Jazz emerged in France and Germany around World War I as a revolutionary split from European musical conventions. America and Germany reacted to jazz's explosion by weaponizing jazz as a manipulative propaganda tool in World War II. In Germany and its occupied territories, jazz faced a suppressive ideological and political reaction. Jazz reemerged after the war as a reformed artistic force that redefined French and German identity, fueling broader post-war intellectual and cultural reforms that broke barriers and embraced a modernist, cosmopolitan cultural landscape. The story of jazz in Europe begins with revolution, not in Europe, but in America, where enslaved people sang work songs and spirituals, which evolved into blues in the 1860s. In New Orleans' Congo Square, enslaved people could sing traditional African music together. Brass bands, ragtime, and New Orleans' European Creole and African influences all contributed to the revolution of jazz around the turn of the century, disrupting conventions to focus on improvisation and individual expression. When the United States joined World War I in 1917, they assigned to France the renowned African-American regiment, the 369th Infantry. Their band has been widely cited as the catalyst for the spread of jazz across Europe and for a major European cultural revolution. After World War I, France embraced jazz as part of a wider revolution known as Les Années Folles, or the Crazy Years. People such as the dancer Josephine Baker and the Cubist artist Pablo Picasso defined this era. Jazz was revolutionary because it dismantled musical conventions in favor of improvisation, thereby fostering creativity and self-expression. Jazz embraced modernism and was integral to the parallel revolution in art and literature. Jazz even inspired classical composers, including the French composer Maurice Ravel, who said in an interview, "Abroad we take jazz seriously. It is influencing our work." By the early 1930s, jazz had firmly established itself in European culture. The Hot Club de France was founded in 1932, and the Jazz Hot magazine was established in 1935, publishing the first jazz discography and record label, Disc Swing. However, jazz also provoked strong reactions. The poet and critic André Soiret described jazz as an orchestra of brutes with non-opposable thumbs. Jazz was even more popular in Germany than ever, but in 1935 the Nazi Party reacted to jazz's popularity by banning it from radio broadcasts and attempting to eliminate it through other laws. Officials labeled it degenerate music for its association with American culture, African Americans, Jewish culture, and individual freedom. They censored jazz to create a silo free of anything deemed unpatriotic. Jazz became a way for German youth to express their resistance, a reaction of dissent to German suppression. Initially, Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's propaganda chief, had publicly called jazz degenerate and inappropriate for Germans. However, since Goebbels needed a way to connect with, influence, and ultimately demoralize Allied service members, he decided to harness jazz to help the Nazis in reaction to its popularity in other countries. In 1939, Goebbels found his weapon, German saxophonist and bandleader Lutz Templin. They decided to start broadcasting propaganda to dishearten and sway British troops. They formed a new government-approved jazz band named Charlie and His Orchestra, which recorded popular swing jazz hits with lyrics promoting Hitler's ideals, glorifying the German army, and disparaging Churchill and other leaders. The terrible lyrics were made palatable by the appealing music so that listeners would not turn off the radio.
Let's go shelling where they're dwelling. Let's shell churches, women, children too. Let us go to it, let's do it, let's bomb neutrals too. Let's go bombing.
Glenn Miller, the famous American big band conductor, joined the Army Air Corps in 1942. In 1943, he formed the Captain Glenn Miller Army Air Force Band, using swing to boost Allied morale. In 1944, the American broadcasting station in Europe started airing the weekly propagandistic radio show The German Wehrmacht Hour, targeted at the Germans. It featured music mainly by Miller as well as popular American musicians. This was in reaction to Nazi propaganda and aimed to demoralize Wehrmacht forces by showcasing the Allies' strength through American music. As Goebbels stated, the task of English propaganda is to drive a wedge between the German people and its leadership. It succeeded, and Germans expressed their love of the program. At the show's peak, an estimated 80% of occupied Europe tuned in, connecting them to the free world and jazz, while there's little evidence that Charlie and his orchestra had the impact Goebbels intended. Meanwhile, jazz was struggling in France, as many musicians had been recruited into the army during the war. Charles Delaunay and the Hot Club de France organized more than 80 underground jazz concerts during the occupation. The French worried that Hitler would not permit jazz in France, but he was more tolerant, allowing them to continue playing traditional music. The French took this opportunity to portray jazz as intrinsically French, publishing some Louis Armstrong records under the name of French singer Jean Sablon. Remarkably, the Nazis bought it. They banned American swing, but endorsed traditional French jazz, even placing Nazi propaganda alongside popular songs on the radio. French efforts to continue playing jazz shows jazz's cultural significance. Jazz became a revolutionary cultural phenomenon which fueled a German reaction of suppression and a bilateral reaction of jazz's use as propaganda. When World War II ended in 1945, the explosion of a new cultural and political paradigm devoid of the racism they experienced at home provided an ideal atmosphere for black musicians to move to France. A second wave of Americans soon arrived in France to experience the vitality of the post-war rebirth. The music that was once propaganda in the war reformed to express freedom and resilience. As saxophonist Dexter Gordon said, the fact that you're an artist in Europe means something. They treat you with a lot of respect. Jazz musically reformed, which aided the civil rights movement. Although swing's commercialization often excluded black artists, bebop in the 1940s allowed black musicians to share the spotlight. A more defined and respectable music form, jazz was now played in both nightclubs and concert halls, bringing together a multiracial audience and challenging social conventions. In West Germany, jazz connected people to America and democracy as they recovered from Nazi rule. In East Germany, jazz remained a symbol of resistance. In France, jazz flourished, with artists such as Django Reinhardt thriving. Musicians could travel frequently between France and the US. The younger population idolized jazz legends like Ellington and Armstrong. The music was a chant for freedom that echoed throughout France as they reformed their identity after the war, part of a broader revolution of modernism, cosmopolitanism, and racial equality. Jazz dismantled stereotypes, such as the idea that white artists make art only for white audiences and black artists for black audiences. All races, in all sorts of venues, enjoyed jazz together. In Miles Davis's autobiography, he stated, "Living in Paris changed the way I looked at things forever. I loved being in Paris and loved the way I was treated." Jazz's spontaneous and improvisational nature contributed to a major cultural revolution during the 20s, led to a reaction of its use as World War II propaganda, and eventually led to cultural reform after the war. As jazz developed, it symbolized freedom from authoritarian constraint, embracing modernism and rejecting conformity through its avant-garde nature and American roots. From the informal desegregation of venues such as concert halls to the mass realization that music could be enjoyed by everybody together, jazz helped create a more united cultural environment worldwide. Today, music continues to act as a vessel for promoting change, asserting an opinion, and banding together. The music of freedom contributed to a revolution, caused reaction, and eventually sparked reform. The music of freedom left a lasting legacy.
Let's go bumming, it's becoming quite the thing to do.